Let me tell you a quiet tale, a forgotten tale of the second Dragonborn of Skyrim. Set in an age the old scholars would later call the 1900th Skyrim era, a time when dragons had returned to the skies, when old prophecies woke from their sleep, and a single voice, born in a mortal throat, could shake the world like thunder. Let me tell you a quiet tale. As the story begins in the Great Hall of Whiterun. On the night the Dragonborn spoke with Jarl Balgruuf the Greater, the hall of Dragon's Reach was warm. Firelight glowed from the great central hearth. The Dragonborn stood near the base of the Jarl's throne, his armor still smudged with soot and dust. A faint scent of smoke clung to him, the memory of the battle at the Western Watchtower still fresh in his mind. The Jarl watched him closely. Balgruuf sat leaning back on his throne, not leaning back in comfort. One hand lifted towards his chin, and the other resting on his throne. The Dragonborn spoke slowly. He described the attack, the roar of the dragon as it swooped down from the sky, the way its wings beat the air like thunder, how the guards fought bravely, how some ran, how some walked away with stories to share, while others walked into their final tale. He spoke of arrows hissing upward, of the smell of burning wood and charred earth. He told the Jarl how, at last, the dragon had fallen, how it had crashed to the ground on a pile of his own dead soldiers. And then he told him of the strange thing that happened after, how the dragon's flesh had burned away into light, how its bones were left bare upon the ground, how that light had swirled, rising like sparks from a forge, then rushing toward him, filling him with a warmth and power that felt both strange and familiar. He told Balgruuf how the guards had watched, how one of them had whispered that word, that old word of legend, Dragonborn. The hall shifted at that moment, not into silence, but into tension, uncertainty. A few of the court members exchanged doubtful glances. Proventus raised a brow. Irileth folded her arms and stared sharply. Balgruuf himself leaned back slightly, not in disbelief, but in caution. A small dispute rose in the hall. Proventus spoke first, unsure if such a thing was even possible. A guard insisted he had heard legends but never believed them. Irileth defended the idea with stern conviction, reminding the court that dragons had returned. So why not dragonborns? Throughout the whole tension in the hall, Jarl Balgruuf had already made up his mind. He too had heard the voice earlier that day. The same voice everyone had heard. As the Dragonborn walked back toward Dragon's Reach, a long, rolling call, echoing across the sky. A single word carried on the wind, drawn out, powerful, old, deep. So deep it seemed to tremble through the very stones beneath their feet. It was a voice, but not quite human, not quite mortal. A voice that sounded as though the mountains themselves were speaking a name. Dovahkiin. The moment that great shout rippled over Whiterun, the Jarl understood. He knew where the voice had come from, and he knew the only ones who could wield such a call. The ones spoken of in the old tales of the Scalds. The Greybeards. The Dragonborn, unfamiliar with the name, lifted his gaze. He did not yet know of such people. So he asked the Jarl who these Greybeards were, and what they wanted with him. Jarl Balgruuf exhaled slowly. Then he explained that the Greybeards were masters of the way of the voice, that they lived far above the clouds, on the slopes of the throat of the world, in the monastery called High Hrothgar. He told the Dragonborn that the shout they had just heard was no ordinary sound. It was a summons, a call given only when the Greybeards recognized the birth of a Dragonborn. The Jarl's words were steady, but the weight of them settled heavily in the now quiet hall. He told the Dragonborn that this was no small thing, no ordinary errand. The Greybeards rarely spoke, rarely intervened. If they had called, it not only meant the Greybeards needed him, but the world. He stepped closer, looking the Dragonborn in the eye. He told him he must go, must climb the mountain, must answer the summons, for few were ever called, and fewer still had the courage to climb. The Dragonborn listened. He nodded once, a simple gesture, but in it was acceptance. He was Dragonborn. That night, after leaving Dragon's Reach, the Dragonborn stepped beyond the gates of Whiterun. He found the world outside washed in a cold, relentless rain. Grey clouds pressed low against the sky, blurring the distant mountains into the dark. Wind pushed against the old wooden posts lining the road. The guards at their watch stood tall, torches clutched tightly in their hands, their flames bending sideways in the storm as they stared into the distance. The Dragonborn began his march. The stone path stretched ahead of him. Broad cobblestones sat half-sunken into packed earth, uneven, weathered by years of wind and wandering feet, a faint reminder of how old these roads truly were. At the front gates of Whiterun, just beyond the first wooden archway, there, a small Khajiit camp sat huddled close to the outer walls. Their tents were low and weather-worn, canvas edges fluttering in the rain-charged wind. Even through the cold rain, the faint scent of moon sugar tea drifted across the night warm, sweet, soft against the bitterness of the cold night. Moon sugar was a curious thing. Once someone outside of the Khajiit race tasted it, truly tasted it, it was nearly impossible to let go. A sweetness that lingered in the bones. Even the Dragonborn, weary from the night, would not have minded trying a cup, just enough to take the chill from his breath. But he knew this was not the night for such temptations. Destiny left little room for distractions, and the mountain ahead demanded a clear mind. The same mountain the Dragonborn could see, even from Whiterun, the throat of the world. Its dark shape rose above the storm, standing tall over Skyrim, like a silent watcher of the world. But High Hrothgar itself was still hidden by the drifting snow along the peaks, hidden by the heavy darkness that that blanketed the Skyrim night. Yet even unseen, its presence remained unchanged. The greybeards were calling for him. Beyond the Khajiit camp, just across the rain-stoned road, stood the Whiterun stables. Their long wooden beams rose dark and sturdy against the storm. Inside the stalls, there was one horse, a black stallion, the Dragonborn's own loyal mount, a horse he had purchased with the last 1,000 gold he possessed, gold taken from the pockets of men who had fallen beneath his blade. With practiced ease, he swung himself into the saddle. The stallion shifted beneath him. The Dragonborn tightened the reins, lowered his head against the driving rain, and urged the black horse forward toward the path only he could walk. The Dragonborn began his march toward High Hrothgar, and fortunately for him, the road that led to the throat of the world stretched eastward, straight toward the quiet village of Riverwood, the first stop on his long journey into the clouds. Mounted on his black stallion, he rode past small farms, fields of wheat and cabbages, smoke curling gently from chimney tops, houses glowing faintly from morning fires, their warmth drifting into the cold air. The Dragonborn did not hurry. He had learned, even in these early days of his path, that haste was not necessary. Sometimes the world spoke in quiet details. Its land was something meant to be looked upon, to be felt, to be breathed in slowly. The distant skies shifted above him, clouds drifting, planets gleaming, moving with a slow, ancient rhythm that felt alive, as if the heavens themselves were breathing. And he knew, if one traveled too quickly, they would miss its beauty. By the time he reached Riverwood, night had already settled. But it was not a dark night. The sky held a lighter shade, a soft glow that revealed the sleeping village in quiet perfection. The river rushed gently beneath the wooden bridge. Moonlight shimmered on its surface. And from the sleeping giant inn, a familiar song floated out into the calm air. The Dragonborn comes. Voices sang in warm harmony, as if the news of the Dragonborn had already spread across Skyrim, as if every soul in the inn lifted their voices just for him. He did not stop at the inn, though warm food and rest called to him. Instead, he turned toward a small house at the far end of the village, the home beside the lumber mill, where a man once he met a while ago, Ralof, the Stormcloak soldier who had escaped Helgen at his side. Ralof was not his friend, not truly, but he was something rarer, the man who had stood beside the Dragonborn as the first dragon in centuries descended upon them, the man who had seen fire fall from the sky and lived to tell the tale. That moment alone bound them together, a bond stronger than Ysgramor's will. The Dragonborn stepped toward the door. Warm light flickered through the cracks in the shutters, and the soft hum of voices drifted through the wood. Inside, he saw Gerda, Rylof's sister, sitting beside the table with her husband, Hod. Across the room, Ralof lay back on his bed, one arm folded behind his head, telling young Frodnar ancient stories of the Nords and the quiet beauty of Sovngarde. By the time the Dragonborn walked in, everyone froze for a heartbeat. Then their faces brightened at once, as if they were welcoming an old friend returning from a long journey. They greeted him with warmth, with honest joy. "By Shor's bones," Ralof murmured softly. "You made it back." The Dragonborn returned the kindness, especially toward Ralof. He and Ralof sat at another table together, exchanging quiet words, asking how each had been since the destruction of Helgen, The Dragonborn spoke of the attack on the Western Watchtower and the strange rumors spreading across Skyrim. Rumors calling him Dragonborn. Ralof nodded slowly. He explained how he had stayed in Riverwood for a few days to help his sister run the village's lumber mill. But soon, he would have to leave. He would be heading back to Windhelm to join the war once more. He asked the Dragonborn if he would come with him, if he would stand with the Stormcloaks. The Dragonborn glanced at Ralof with a faint smile. A memory flickered. The same question Ralof had asked back in Helgen, when death loomed over both of them. But this smile was not only for the past. It was for the simple relief that Ralof was still alive and well. He denied Ralof's request gently, explaining his journey to High Hrothgar, the summons of the Greybeards. The climb he had to face. Ralof understood. He knew the importance of this path. Dragons had returned to Skyrim, and that was a danger far greater than any civil war. He warned the Dragonborn of the 7,000 steps leading up the throat of the world, told him to be cautious of the violent snow winds that swept across the heights. Also, Ralof said with that smooth Nordic tone, "You've done what no one in Skyrim's seen in ages, killing dragons, shouting like the heroes of old. If a man like you stood with us, the war would be over before the next winter." He leaned forward slightly. Skyrim needs more than soldiers right now. It needs a symbol, someone who can remind our people why we fight. If you ever choose to stand with the Stormcloaks, every man and woman in Windhelm will stand a little taller, and maybe, just maybe, we can end this war for good. When your journey with the Greybeards is over, come to Windhelm. The Dragonborn understood the weight of the Civil War, how it split the Nords from the inside, how it weakened Skyrim. He promised Ralof that when the time came, he would join the fight and help bring the war to its end. Ralof smiled with quiet hope. He asked the Dragonborn if he was leaving soon. The Dragonborn nodded. He had only stopped by to see him, to make sure he was doing well. Gerda overheard the conversation, and with a generous heart, she rose from her seat. "My home is open to you. All of it," she said warmly. "Take what you need, food, tools, a warm bed, whatever helps you on your way." Ever since Helgen, she had supported him. Before he was called Dragonborn, and even more now, without a shadow of doubt, he accepted her kindness. He gathered food and wine, a few tools, and of course, cheese, even a handful of septims for the road. He thanked Gerda for her hospitality and gave Ralof a firm forearm handshake. "Till we meet again, friend. Talos watch over you," Ralof said. "Likewise," the Dragonborn replied, stepping back into the storm. He mounted his black stallion once more, the rain still falling hard over Skyrim. He planned to reach Ivarstead by morning's first light. Riverwood fell behind him, and soon the warm voices of the sleeping giant inn were swallowed by the sounds of nature. The road narrowed. The trees grew thicker. Ancient trunks rose on either side of the path, trees that had stood for centuries, as if they had witnessed the arrival of the first Atmorans themselves, the first Nords who crossed the frozen sea from Atmora and carved the early chapters of Skyrim's history. Tall pines swayed gently in the wind. Occasionally, the call of a distant bird echoed through the forest, low, lonely, timeless. The Dragonborn listened calmly. He drank a small sip of wine and took a bite of cheese to keep himself moving. Wolves, shadows, shapes that prowled the tree line. But none dared test the speed of his black stallion. a true Nordic horse. Legends claimed a Dragonborn's horse could walk anywhere its rider willed it to go, strong enough to climb mountains. A sight to behold. As he traveled, another thought rose quietly in his mind. Not long ago, he had been caught crossing the border into Skyrim, mistaken for a rebel, thrown in with Ralof, Ulfric Stormcloak, and the others bound for the headsman's block. He had stood in Helgen's courtyard, waiting for death, waiting for Sovngarde. And now, still alive and now named Dragonborn, a man carrying the blood of Akatosh, the dragon god of time, the chief deity of the 9 divines, chosen by fate when he least expected it. Hours passed. The forest thinned. The land began to rise hill by hill, stone by stone, until at last, in the distance, the faint shape of Ivarstead appeared. By the time he reached Ivarstead, the sun had begun to rise. Simple houses lined the riverbank. A small mill turned slowly with the current, and the Villemere Inn sat near the center of the village, warm light glowing behind its windows. The town felt similar to Riverwood, quiet, humble, peaceful, but it could not compare to Riverwood's night beauty. Ivarstead clung to the edge of the river, where the old stone bridge connected the village to the first steps of High Hrothgar, all of it resting beneath the looming shadow of the great mountain. The Dragonborn dismounted his horse and tied the reins to a wooden post beside the Villemere Inn. Both horse and man needed rest. As the sunlight warmed the earth, the Dragonborn felt fatigue settle into his bones. His journey to High Hrothgar was far from over, and the 7,000 steps alone were a challenge of their own. He would need every drop of strength he could gather if he was to train with the Greybeards and learn the ancient way of the voice. So he stepped into the Villemere Inn. Warmth embraced him at once. A small fire crackled in the hearth. Music drifted softly through the room. The voices of locals and wandering travelers blended together, filling the inn with life. He approached the innkeeper and purchased a room for the day. 10 septims, paid with the coins he had received from Gerda. But before retiring to rest, he lingered. He spoke with the people of Ivarstead, listened to their stories, and soon realized that everyone here knew of the steps, knew of the Greybeards, knew the weight of that mountain path. They had lived their entire lives beneath its shadow. Few climbed it, but all respected it. The Dragonborn heard the same warnings repeated over and over. The climb was long, the air was thin, the path tiring, and creatures wandered the mountain, wolves in the lower woods, ice wraiths gliding along the snowy ledges. One old man, his face lined with age, his humor sharp, told him of the 7,000 steps. The way he spoke made the words feel heavier, the stairs longer, as if the end does not exist. The Dragonborn smiled faintly. He had heard many rumors, too many to count. Soon, the heat of the rising sun began to warm his armor. Weariness clouded his limbs. His eyes felt heavier. He knew it was time to rest. Time to let sleep claim him. Time to prepare for the journey that awaited him. The 7,000 steps to High Hrothgar.